Billionaire CEO invited his ex to mock her. She arrived with his secret son and turned the tables. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce the newest member of the Hayes family legacy. The confident voice cut through the elegant murmur of the grand ballroom like a thunderclap, causing every head to turn toward the entrance where Rachel Summers stood with a poised 12-year-old boy at her side. Jackson Hayes froze mid-conversation, champagne flute suspended halfway to his lips as his eyes locked on the woman he hadn't seen in 13 years, and the boy whose features mirrored his own with unmistakable clarity. "Rachel," he managed, his voice barely audible as the blood drained from his face. "Hello, Jackson," she replied, her voice steady despite the thundering of her heart. "I believe it's time you met your son. Have you ever wondered what happens when a man's carefully constructed world collides with the truth he's spent years avoiding? This is the story of a reunion that shattered pretenses, of secrets finally brought to light, and of a boy whose existence would transform the lives of everyone in that glittering ballroom. If you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or thought yourself powerless against someone with seemingly every advantage, this story will resonate in your soul. The most devastating weapon against arrogance isn't revenge, it's truth. I'm Mr. Harrison, and today I'm sharing the remarkable story of how a child's existence changed the course of a bitter rivalry between a tech billionaire and the woman he was determined to humiliate. The invitation had arrived 3 weeks earlier, an elegant cream envelope with the Hayes Industries logo embossed in silver. Rachel had stared at it for several minutes before finding the courage to open it, her fingers trembling slightly as they broke the seal. "Ms. Rachel Summers," the card read in flowing calligraphy. "Jackson Hayes requests the pleasure of your company at the Hayes Industries 20th Anniversary Gala." A handwritten note had been added at the bottom in the distinctive sharp script she still recognized after all these years. "For old time's sake, it would amuse me to see how far you've fallen. J." Rachel had nearly torn the invitation to pieces then and there. The audacity, the cruelty of it, inviting her to witness his triumph while reminding her of everything she had lost when she'd walked away from him. In the 13 years since their relationship had imploded, Jackson Hayes had transformed from a merely wealthy entrepreneur to one of the most powerful CEOs in the country. His face regularly appearing on business magazine covers, his name synonymous with innovation and ruthless success. Meanwhile, Rachel had rebuilt her life quietly, away from the spotlight, focusing on the one thing that mattered more than any fortune or fame: her son. Ethan had come into the kitchen as she sat contemplating the invitation, his dark hair falling across his forehead in a way that painfully echoed his father's. "Mom, what's that?" he'd asked, reaching for the orange juice in the refrigerator. Rachel had quickly slipped the invitation into a drawer. Nothing important, just a work thing. But later that night, after Ethan had gone to bed, she'd retrieved the invitation and studied it again. The mockery in those handwritten words burned, but beneath her initial anger, a different emotion began to surface: determination. For 12 years, she had protected Ethan from the truth about his father, a man who had made it abundantly clear that children had no place in his ambitious life plan. She had never asked Jackson for money, had never used his name, had built their life through her own hard work and sacrifice. But as Ethan grew, the questions had become more frequent, more pointed. Why don't I have a dad like my friends? What was he like? Why did he leave? She had crafted careful answers, partial truths that shielded both Ethan and Jackson, one from pain, the other from responsibility he had explicitly rejected. Looking at the invitation, Rachel made a decision. Perhaps it was time for the truth, not as an act of revenge, but as an acknowledgement of reality. Jackson Hayes had invited her to his celebration to humiliate her, to showcase his success against her presumed failure. He had no idea that her life's greatest achievement would be standing right beside her. Across town, in his penthouse office atop the gleaming Hayes Industries Tower, Jackson Hayes studied the RSVP list for his company's 20th anniversary gala with calculated precision. His finger paused on a name that had been checked off: Rachel Summers. "She actually accepted," he murmured, a cold smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Sir." His assistant hovered nervously at his shoulder. "Is there a problem?" "Not at all, Melissa. In fact, it's perfect. Jackson leaned back in his custom leather chair, satisfaction radiating from his imposing frame. Success is meaningless without witnesses to your triumph, especially those who once doubted you. At 45, Jackson Hayes had constructed an empire that transformed him from merely wealthy to legendary. Hayes Industries dominated the tech landscape, its innovations reshaping how the world conducted business. The boy who had clawed his way up from middle-class obscurity now commanded boardrooms with a single glance, his name synonymous with ruthless brilliance. Yet for all his achievements, one failure continued to gnaw at him, the memory of the only person who had ever walked away from him on their own terms. 13 years earlier, Rachel Summers had been the rising star of his R&D department, brilliant and beautiful, with a quiet strength that had initially attracted him. Their relationship had burned bright and fast, until the night she had declared herself unwilling to be collateral damage in his pursuit of success, and simply left. Not fired, not bought out, not strategically removed. She had simply walked away, disappearing from his life with a quiet finality that had infuriated him more than any confrontation could have. In the cathedral of his memory, she remained the single unresolved variable, the one person who had denied him the satisfaction of dictating the terms of their separation. The guest list looks good otherwise, Jackson continued, handing the tablet back to his assistant. Make sure the Westbrook contingent is seated near me. I want to close that acquisition before the end of the quarter. Of course, sir. Melissa hesitated, then added, And Miss Summers? Where should she be seated? Jackson's smile turned predatory. Table 19. Far enough from the main table to make the point, but close enough that she won't miss a moment of the evening's celebrations. As Melissa left, Jackson turned to the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city he had conquered. From this height, people looked like ants, scurrying about their insignificant lives while he shaped the future from his lofty perch. This was what Rachel had walked away from, the chance to stand beside him as he built an empire. He imagined her now, struggling financially, her once promising career stunted, perhaps living in some dreary apartment, regretting the night she had chosen pride over pragmatism. The thought pleased him as he turned back to the quarterly projections on his screen. The invitation would correct that imbalance. Finally, Rachel Summers would have to acknowledge that she had made the wrong choice. What Jackson Hayes couldn't know was just how wrong he was. About everything. Mom, is this tie okay? Ethan stood in the doorway of their modest apartment, fidgeting with the navy blue tie that complemented his charcoal suit. At 12, he was tall for his age, with a seriousness in his dark eyes that sometimes made Rachel's heart ache. It's perfect, she assured him, crossing the room to make a minor adjustment. You look incredibly handsome. I'm nervous, he admitted, his voice smaller than usual. What if he doesn't like me? Rachel knelt to meet her son's eyes, her hands resting gently on his shoulders. Ethan, listen to me. Your father's opinion, good or bad, doesn't define your worth. You are extraordinary, with or without his recognition. But what if he's angry, that you never told him about me? He probably will be at first, Rachel acknowledged honestly. Your father doesn't like surprises, especially ones he can't control. But once he gets to know you, she smiled, touching his cheek gently. Well, not even Jackson Hayes could resist being proud of a son like you. The truth was, Rachel had no idea how Jackson would react. The man she had known 13 years ago would have seen a child as an inconvenience at best, an obstacle to his ambitions at worst. He had made his position on fatherhood crystal clear the night before she left, when he dismissed the idea of children as anchors that drown ambition. But people could change in 13 years. Couldn't they? Are you sure about this? Diane's voice had been laden with concern when Rachel called to tell her the plan. As Rachel's closest friend since college, she was one of the few people who knew the full story of Rachel's relationship with Jackson and Ethan's paternity. No, Rachel had admitted. But I'm sure Ethan deserves the chance to meet his father, and Jackson deserves to know his son exists. Even though he explicitly told you he never wanted children, that they were, what was his charming phrase? Anchors that drown ambition? People can change in 13 years, Rachel had said, though her tone lacked conviction. Diane had snorted. Jackson Hayes? The man who fired his own mentor when the older man's illness started affecting productivity? The man who dated that model for exactly 3 months before dropping her, when she'd served her purpose at the industry events he needed to impress. I know, Rachel had sighed. But this isn't about Jackson, not really. It's about Ethan. He's asking questions I can't answer, feeling the absence of something I can't provide. I have to at least try to give him this connection, even if it doesn't work out the way we hope. You're a good mother, Rachel. Better than he deserves, Diane had said softly. Just promise me you'll protect your heart. Jackson Hayes broke it once. Don't give him the chance to do it again. Now, as their taxi approached the Meridian Grand Hotel, Rachel felt Ethan's hand slip into hers. The gesture, so rare now that he was entering adolescence and increasingly conscious of his independence, reminded her of why she was doing this. Not for Jackson, not even for herself, but for the remarkable young man beside her, who deserved to know where he came from, even if that knowledge came with pain. Remember, she said quietly as the taxi pulled up to the gleaming entrance. No matter what happens in there, you are loved, you are wanted, you are enough exactly as you are. Ethan nodded, squaring his shoulders in a gesture so reminiscent of his father that Rachel felt a momentary pang. Then, invitation in hand, they stepped through the grand doors and into the lion's den. If you've ever faced a moment of truth that could change everything, hit that like button. And if you believe that sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply show up with our authentic selves, subscribe to Timeless Love Tales with Mr. Harrison for more stories that remind us of the courage it takes to be vulnerable in a world that rewards armor. The Meridian's grand ballroom was a symphony of wealth and power, crystal chandeliers casting prismatic light over tables adorned with white orchids and silver candelabras. The city's elite in designer finery circulating with practiced ease. A string quartet played in one corner, their music a refined backdrop to the hum of influential conversations. Rachel scanned the room, her heart racing despite her outward composure. And then she saw him. Jackson Hayes stood at the center of an admiring circle, commanding attention without effort. Success had not softened him but rather honed him to a sharper edge. His jawline more defined, his gestures more precise, his smile more practiced but never reaching his eyes. Is that him? Ethan whispered, following her gaze. Yes, Rachel confirmed softly. That's your father. Something shifted in Ethan's expression. Curiosity, apprehension, and something else. A hunger for connection that Rachel recognized with both understanding and fear. This moment would change him, would change them both, in ways she couldn't fully predict. Taking a deep breath, Rachel stepped forward, Ethan at her side. As they moved through the crowd, conversations paused, heads turned. Rachel was no longer the insider she had once been in this world, but she carried herself with the quiet dignity of someone who had nothing to prove. They were halfway across the room when Jackson finally noticed the ripple of attention. His gaze swept the crowd, seeking its source, and then locked on Rachel. For a split second, his practiced mask slipped, genuine shock flashing across his features before he recovered, his expression settling into cool amusement. He excused himself from his group and moved toward them with the confident stride of a man accustomed to controlling every situation. Rachel, he said as he approached, his voice carrying just the right note of casual surprise. You actually came. How unexpected. Hello, Jackson, Rachel replied, her voice steady despite the thundering of her heart. Thank you for the invitation. His gaze flicked briefly to Ethan, dismissive at first, then sharpened with sudden interest as he registered the boy's features. The resemblance was undeniable. The same dark eyes, the same strong jawline, the same slight cleft in the chin. And who might this be? Jackson asked, his tone carefully neutral though his eyes had narrowed slightly. Rachel placed a protective hand on Ethan's shoulder. This is my son, Ethan. Ethan, this is Jackson Hayes. Your son, Jackson repeated, the words deliberate, questioning. His gaze moved between them, calculating, assessing. Yes, Rachel confirmed, meeting his eyes directly. My son. Our son. The words hung in the air between them. A truth finally spoken aloud after 12 years of silence. Around them, the nearest guests had fallen quiet, sensing the tension, straining to overhear. Jackson's face hardened, a muscle twitching in his jaw. Perhaps we should continue this conversation somewhere more private, he suggested, his tone making it clear this was not a request. Actually, Rachel replied with calm resolve, I think we're fine right here. Ethan deserves to be acknowledged openly, not hidden away as if he's something shameful. Mom, Ethan said quietly, clearly uncomfortable with becoming the center of attention. It's okay. We can talk somewhere else. His maturity in that moment, his willingness to ease a difficult situation despite his own feelings, filled Rachel with both pride and sadness. He shouldn't have to be the adult here. Of course, she conceded, squeezing his shoulder gently. If that would make you more comfortable. Jackson's gaze lingered on Ethan for a moment longer, his expression unreadable, before he turned abruptly. Follow me, he instructed, already moving toward a door at the side of the ballroom. As they followed, Rachel could feel the weight of hundreds of curious eyes on their backs, could hear the murmur of speculation rising in their wake. By morning, this encounter would be the talk of the business world, the gossip columns, the social media sphere. She had known this would happen, had prepared herself for it, but the reality was still overwhelming. Jackson led them to a small private lounge adjacent to the ballroom, closing the door firmly behind them. The room was elegantly appointed with leather sofas and a small bar, clearly designed for VIP guests needing a moment away from the main event. Sit, he directed, moving to pour himself a drink without offering them anything. Rachel and Ethan settled on one of the sofas, still side by side, still a united front. Jackson remained standing, swirling amber liquid in a crystal tumbler, his back to them for several long moments as he visibly gathered himself. When he finally turned, his expression was controlled, his posture rigid. Explain, he demanded, his gaze fixed on Rachel. I think it's fairly self-explanatory, she replied evenly. Ethan is 12 years old. I was 8 weeks pregnant when I left you. And you didn't think this information might be relevant to share? His voice was dangerously quiet. You made your position on children perfectly clear, Rachel reminded him. The night before I left, you said, and I quote, children are anchors that drown ambition. I will never sacrifice my future for the conventional trap of fatherhood. Jackson's eyes flickered with recognition of his own words, though he didn't acknowledge them directly. Instead, he turned his attention to Ethan, studying him with clinical detachment. Stand up, boy, he instructed. Ethan glanced at his mother, who nodded slightly, then rose to his feet, standing straight under Jackson's scrutiny. What grade are you in? Jackson asked abruptly. 8th, Ethan answered. I skipped 5th grade. A flicker of something, approval perhaps, crossed Jackson's face. Subjects. I like science and math best, Ethan said. But I'm good at most things, except art. I'm terrible at drawing. The corner of Jackson's mouth twitched, almost a smile. I was never much for art myself, he admitted, then continued his interrogation. Sports. Swimming and chess, if that counts as a sport. It counts, Jackson confirmed, circling Ethan slowly. Height and weight. 5'7", 130 pounds. Ethan replied, his discomfort with this examination evident but his composure admirable. Medical history? That's enough, Rachel interrupted, standing as well. He's not a thoroughbred you're considering purchasing, Jackson. He's a person. Your son. Jackson shot her a cold look. I'm attempting to gather basic information about a child you claim is mine. I don't claim anything, Rachel said firmly. Ethan is your biological son. If you want DNA confirmation, we can arrange that, though I think your eyes are telling you what you need to know. Jackson didn't deny this, his gaze returning to Ethan with that same calculating assessment. Why now? He asked Rachel, though his eyes remained on the boy. After 12 years of silence, why bring him here tonight? Because you invited me, Rachel said simply. You sent that invitation to mock me, to showcase your success against my presumed failure. I came to show you that my life without you has been rich and meaningful in ways you can't measure with stock prices or profit margins. So this is revenge, Jackson concluded, his tone dismissive. No, Rachel corrected him. This is truth. Ethan has been asking about his father. He deserves to know who you are, and you deserve to know about him. What you do with that knowledge is entirely up to you. Jackson was silent for a long moment, his gaze moving between Rachel and Ethan, his expression giving nothing away. Then he set down his glass with deliberate care. I'll need that DNA test, he said finally. Not because I doubt the resemblance, but because I do nothing without verification. In the meantime, he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. In the meantime, I would like to continue this conversation at a more appropriate time. Tomorrow, perhaps. My office, 10 a.m. It wasn't the reaction Rachel had expected, neither the outright rejection she had feared, nor the immediate connection she had secretly hoped for. It was characteristically a businessman's response. Measured, non-committal, buying time to assess and strategize. We'll be there, she agreed, recognizing that this was at least an opening. Jackson nodded once, then moved toward the door, clearly considering the conversation temporarily concluded. But as his hand touched the doorknob, Ethan spoke up. Mr. Hayes, he said, his young voice steady despite the enormity of the moment. I just want you to know that I'm not here to disrupt your life or ask for anything. Mom and I are doing fine on our own. I just wanted to see you for myself. Jackson turned slowly, something shifting in his expression as he regarded the boy, not quite softening, but perhaps seeing him as a person rather than a problem for the first time. 10 a.m. tomorrow, he repeated, his tone marginally less cold. We'll talk then. With that, he opened the door and stepped back into the gala, leaving Rachel and Ethan alone in the quiet lounge. Are you okay? Rachel asked immediately, turning to her son. Ethan nodded, though his eyes betrayed his emotional turmoil. He's exactly how you described him, he said quietly. Intense. Rachel smiled faintly. That's one word for it. Do you think he's angry about me? Ethan asked, the question revealing the vulnerability beneath his composed exterior. I think he's shocked, Rachel answered honestly. And Jackson doesn't handle surprises well. He needs time to process, to figure out how this fits into his worldview. She took Ethan's hand, squeezing it gently. But his reaction isn't about your worth, Ethan. It's about his limitations. Ethan considered this, then squared his shoulders in that way that so reminded Rachel of the man they had just met. Should we go back to the party? Rachel hesitated, weighing their options. They could leave now, having accomplished what they came for. Or they could return to the gala, facing the curious stares and whispers with dignity. What do you want to do? She asked, letting Ethan make the choice. He thought for a moment, then lifted his chin slightly. I want to stay, just for a little while. I've never been to a fancy party before. Rachel nodded, pride swelling in her chest at his courage. Then we'll stay, together. If you're wondering how a powerful man like Jackson Hayes will handle this unexpected revelation, hit that like button right now. And if you believe that sometimes the most important journeys are the ones that force us to confront the truths we've been avoiding, subscribe to Timeless Love Tales with Mr. Harrison for more stories that explore the complexities of human connection. When they re-entered the ballroom, the atmosphere had noticeably shifted. Word had clearly spread, and they were met with barely concealed curiosity from every direction. Jackson was nowhere to be seen, having apparently retreated to some other part of the venue. Everyone's staring, Ethan murmured, his earlier confidence wavering slightly. Let them, Rachel replied, her voice low but firm. You have nothing to be ashamed of. They made their way to the refreshment table, where Rachel secured a glass of sparkling water for Ethan and a much-needed champagne for herself. As they stood sipping their drinks, a tall, elegant woman in her 60s approached them, her silver hair swept into an immaculate chignon. "You must be Rachel," she said without preamble. "And this young man must be the grandson I never knew I had." Rachel tensed, immediately on guard. "I'm sorry, you are?" "Eleanor Hayes," the woman replied, her keen eyes, so like Jackson's, assessing them both. "Jackson's mother." "It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Hayes," Rachel said cautiously. "Eleanor, please." The older woman's gaze settled on Ethan with undisguised interest. "And what's your name, young man?" "Ethan Summers," he replied, extending his hand with the politeness Rachel had instilled in him. "It's nice to meet you." Eleanor took his hand, her expression softening slightly. "Summers, so you took your mother's name?" "Yes, ma'am." "Well, Ethan Summers, you certainly look like a Hayes." She studied him for a moment longer, then turned to Rachel. "My son can be difficult, but he's not unreasonable. Not entirely, anyway." "I'm not here to cause problems," Rachel assured her. "I just felt it was time for Ethan to know his father, and for Jackson to know his son." Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. 12 years is a long time to keep such a secret." "It is," Rachel acknowledged. "But Jackson made his feelings about fatherhood very clear. I was respecting his stated wishes. And now Ethan is old enough to ask questions I can't answer. He deserves to know where he comes from, even if that knowledge comes with complications." Eleanor's gaze moved between them, her expression unreadable. Then she reached into her evening bag and withdrew a business card. "My contact information," she said, handing it to Rachel. "Regardless of how my son handles this situation, I would like the opportunity to know my grandson." Rachel accepted the card, surprised by the gesture. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Eleanor replied with a wry smile. "The Hayes family is not known for making things easy." With that, she nodded to them both and moved away, her elegant figure soon lost in the crowd. "Was that really my grandmother?" Ethan asked, his eyes wide. "Apparently so," Rachel said, still processing the unexpected encounter. "She seems nice." "She seems formidable," Rachel corrected with a small smile. "But yes, nicer than I expected." They continued their circuit of the ballroom, sampling the elaborate hors d'oeuvres and observing the glittering crowd. Rachel was acutely aware of the whispers that followed them, the speculative glances, the hastily ended conversations as they approached. But she held her head high, refusing to be intimidated by the wealth and power surrounding them. Ethan, for his part, seemed to be recovering from the initial shock of meeting his father, his natural curiosity reasserting itself as he took in the opulent surroundings. "Is this what your life was like when you were with him?" he asked as they paused by one of the enormous floral arrangements. Rachel considered the question. "Parts of it," she said finally. "The glamour, the connections, the sense of being at the center of something important. But it came with a price I wasn't willing to pay." "What price?" "Autonomy, identity, the right to have priorities that didn't align with his." She looked down at her son, his face so like his father's yet so uniquely his own. "If I had stayed, you might never have existed." Jackson was very clear about not wanting children. Ethan absorbed this, his expression thoughtful. "Do you think he'll want to know me now? After tomorrow, I mean?" Rachel wished she could offer certainty, but she had always been honest with her son. "I don't know, sweetheart. Your father is complicated. He sees the world in terms of assets and liabilities, advantages and disadvantages. He'll need time to figure out where you fit in his carefully ordered life. And if I don't fit, then that's his loss," Rachel said firmly. "Not yours." As the evening wore on, Rachel began to feel the emotional toll of the confrontation. Ethan, too, was showing signs of fatigue, his earlier excitement giving way to the natural exhaustion of a 12-year-old up well past his bedtime. "Ready to go?" she asked, noticing him stifle a yawn. He nodded, relief evident in his expression. "Yeah, it's been a lot." They were making their way toward the exit when a familiar voice called Rachel's name. Turning, she found herself face to face with Marcus Whitman, her former colleague from Hayes Industries, and one of the few people who had remained friendly after her departure. "Rachel, I thought that was you," he said. His genuine warmth a stark contrast to the calculated interactions they'd experienced all evening. "It's been, what, 10 years? 13, she corrected with a smile. "It's good to see you, Marcus. You're looking well. Can't complain. R&D director keeps me busy but happy." His gaze shifted to Ethan, curiosity evident but tactfully restrained. "And who's this young man?" "This is my son, Ethan," Rachel said, the simple introduction feeling inadequate after the evening's revelations. "Ethan, this is Mr. Whitman. He and I used to work together." "Nice to meet you, sir," Ethan said politely. Marcus's eyes widened slightly as he took in Ethan's features, the resemblance to Jackson unmistakable up close. "The pleasure's mine," he replied, recovering quickly. "Are you enjoying the party?" "It's very fancy," Ethan said diplomatically. Marcus laughed. "That it is. Hayes Industries doesn't do anything by halves." He turned back to Rachel. "I heard you're doing well at Meridian Tech. Their adaptive learning platform is impressive." Rachel was surprised he knew her current position. "Thank you. It's been rewarding work." "I'm not surprised. You were always the most innovative thinker on the team." He glanced around, then lowered his voice. "Listen, if you ever want to come back to the industry proper, give me a call. We could use someone with your vision." The offer caught Rachel off guard. "That's very kind of you, Marcus, but I'm happy where I am." "Fair enough, but the offer stands." He handed her his card, then added with a meaningful look, "Whatever happens next, remember you have options." As they finally made their exit, Rachel pondered Marcus's words. Options. Something she had fought hard to create for herself and Ethan after leaving Jackson's orbit. Now, with their carefully constructed life potentially upended by tonight's revelation, those options might prove more important than ever. In the taxi heading home, Ethan leaned against her shoulder, his eyelids heavy. "Mom," he murmured sleepily. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm glad we went, even if he doesn't want to know me after tomorrow." Rachel wrapped her arm around him, pulling him close. "Me too. He looked at me like he was trying to solve a puzzle." Ethan continued, his voice drifting. "Like I was a problem he needed to figure out." "That's how your father looks at everything," Rachel said softly. "It's not personal." "I know," Ethan yawned. "But I'm not a puzzle. I'm just me." "Yes, you are," Rachel agreed, pressing a kiss to the top of his head. "And that's more than enough." As the taxi wound through the late-night streets, Rachel gazed out at the city lights, her mind already turning to tomorrow's meeting. Jackson would have recovered from his initial shock by then, would have formulated a strategy, would be prepared to control the narrative. But she, too, had changed in 13 years. She was no longer the young woman who had been dazzled by his brilliance and intimidated by his intensity. She had built a life on her own terms, had raised an extraordinary child, had found strength she never knew she possessed. Whatever happened tomorrow, she was ready. The Hayes Industries headquarters dominated the downtown skyline, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that reflected Jackson's vision of modern innovation. As Rachel and Ethan approached the imposing entrance the next morning, she felt a familiar flutter of anxiety in her stomach. "Nervous?" Ethan asked, surprisingly perceptive as always. "A little," she admitted with a small smile. "It's been a long time since I've been here." "Me too," Ethan joked, trying to lighten the mood. "About 12 years, give or take." Rachel laughed despite her nerves, grateful for her son's attempt at humor. "True enough." The security desk was staffed by a stern-faced guard who checked their IDs with meticulous care before issuing visitor badges. "Mr. Hayes is expecting you," he said, his tone suggesting this was unusual. "Melissa will escort you up." Melissa turned out to be the same assistant who had hovered nervously as Jackson added Rachel's name to the gala guest list. She greeted them with professional courtesy, though her eyes lingered curiously on Ethan as she led them to a private elevator. "Mr. Hayes is in his office," she explained as the elevator ascended smoothly to the top floor. "He's cleared his morning schedule." Rachel nodded, unsurprised that Jackson would approach this meeting with the same focused attention he gave to any significant business matter. That was how he operated, total commitment to the task at hand, whether launching a new product line or confronting an unexpected son. The elevator opened directly into a sleek reception area, all polished surfaces and minimalist design. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, the city spread out below them, a testament to human ambition and engineering. Values Jackson had always prioritized. "This way, please," Melissa directed, leading them down a corridor lined with awards and magazine covers featuring Jackson's stern visage. The message was clear. "You are entering the domain of an exceptional man." She stopped before an imposing door of dark wood, knocked once, and then opened it without waiting for a response. "Ms. Summers and Ethan are here, Mr. Hayes." "Send them in," came the familiar voice, controlled and authoritative. Rachel placed a reassuring hand on Ethan's shoulder as they entered the sanctum of Jackson Hayes. The office was exactly as she would have expected, spacious and meticulously organized, with a massive desk positioned to command both the room and the spectacular view. Jackson stood beside it, dressed in an impeccably tailored suit, his posture rigid. "Thank you for coming," he said formally, as if they were there for a business meeting rather than a life-altering conversation. "Please sit." 2 chairs had been positioned before his desk, creating a dynamic that placed him in the position of authority. Rachel recognized the subtle power play but chose not to comment as she and Ethan took their seats. Jackson remained standing for a moment longer, his gaze fixed on Ethan with that same analytical intensity he had displayed the night before. Then, seemingly coming to a decision, he moved around the desk and took the chair opposite them. "I've arranged for a DNA test," he began without preamble. "The technician will be here at 11 to collect samples." "That's fine," Rachel agreed, having expected this. "Though I think we both know what the results will show." Jackson didn't acknowledge this, instead turning his attention to Ethan. "Did you sleep well?" he asked, the question so unexpectedly ordinary that it momentarily caught both Rachel and Ethan off guard. "Yes, sir," Ethan replied after a brief hesitation. "Though it was kind of hard to fall asleep. A lot to think about." "I imagine so." Jackson studied him for a moment longer, then asked, "What do you know about me?" "About what I do." Ethan glanced at his mother, who nodded encouragingly. "I know you founded Hayes Industries when you were 25, he began, his voice gaining confidence as he spoke. "You started with communication technology but expanded into artificial intelligence and renewable energy. Your adaptive learning algorithms revolutionized how computers process information, and your clean energy initiatives have reduced carbon emissions by significant percentages in the cities where they've been implemented." Jackson's eyebrows rose slightly, clearly impressed by the boy's knowledge. "Your mother told you all this?" "Some of it," Ethan acknowledged. "I researched the rest myself. I was curious. About you. About where I came from." Ethan met Jackson's gaze directly, a hint of challenge in his young eyes. "Mom always said I got my interest in technology from you." Something flickered across Jackson's face. Surprise, perhaps, or an emotion less easily categorized. "And what else did your mother tell you about me?" "That you're brilliant but intense. That you see solutions where other people see only problems. That you don't compromise easily." Ethan paused, then added with quiet honesty, "That you didn't want children because you thought they would hold you back." Jackson's gaze shifted to Rachel, a flash of accusation in his eyes. "You told him that?" "I told him the truth," Rachel replied evenly, "in age-appropriate ways as he grew. I never demonized you, Jackson. I simply explained your priorities as you expressed them to me. And yet you kept his existence from me for 12 years. You made your position on fatherhood abundantly clear," Rachel reminded him. "I was respecting your stated wishes. By making a unilateral decision about my child?" "Our child," Rachel corrected firmly. "And yes, at the time, it seemed the kindest choice for everyone involved." Jackson's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Ethan spoke up. "It's not Mom's fault," he said, his young voice steady despite the tension in the room. She was protecting both of us. Me from rejection, and you from something you said you didn't want. Jackson stared at the boy, clearly taken aback by his maturity and insight. You speak very well for your age, he observed after a moment. Mom says I've been negotiating since I could talk. Ethan replied with a small smile. She says I get that from you too. Again, that flicker of something indefinable crossed Jackson's face. He leaned back in his chair, his posture marginally less rigid. Tell me about your science project, he said abruptly. The one that might qualify for the regional competition. Ethan's face lit up, his natural enthusiasm breaking through the tension. It's a solar energy converter with an adaptive efficiency algorithm, he explained, his hands moving animatedly as he described the technical details. Most solar panels lose efficiency when conditions aren't optimal, but my design includes a microprocessor that adjusts the collection parameters based on real-time environmental data. As Ethan continued his explanation, growing more confident with each sentence, Rachel watched Jackson's face. The businessman's mask was slipping, replaced by genuine interest and, could it be, a hint of pride. He asked pointed questions that demonstrated his grasp of the technology, and Ethan responded with a technical fluency that belied his 12 years. The prototype is small, of course, Ethan was saying, but the principles could be scaled up for commercial applications. The real innovation is in the algorithm, not the hardware. Software over hardware, Jackson murmured. That's been a guiding principle at Hayes Industries for the past decade. I know, Ethan said. I read your interview in Tech Innovator last year. You said, hardware is finite, but software is limited only by imagination. Jackson looked genuinely surprised. You read my interviews? Ethan nodded, suddenly self-conscious. Sometimes, when I could find them online. A silence fell over the room, heavy with unspoken emotions. Rachel could see Jackson processing, recalibrating, adjusting his worldview to accommodate this new reality. A son who had been following his career from afar, studying his words, seeking connection even in absence. I have a lab, Jackson said finally. Here in the building. State-of-the-art equipment, some of it not even on the market yet. He hesitated, then added, Would you like to see it? Ethan's eyes widened. Really? If your mother approves? Jackson added, glancing at Rachel with an expression that was part challenge, part genuine request. Rachel considered the offer. Part of her wanted to refuse, to protect Ethan from potential disappointment if Jackson's interest proved fleeting. But the hope in her son's eyes made the decision for her. That would be fine, she agreed, as long as I can come along. Of course, Jackson said, rising from his chair with renewed energy. Melissa can reschedule my 11 o'clock. The DNA technician can wait. As they followed Jackson through the corridors of Hayes Industries, Rachel noticed the subtle shift in his demeanor. The rigid control had loosened slightly, replaced by a focused enthusiasm she remembered from the early days of their relationship, when he would spend hours showing her his latest innovations. Employees they passed looked startled to see their CEO personally escorting visitors, especially a child who bore such a striking resemblance to him. Whispers followed in their wake, but Jackson seemed oblivious, his attention fixed on their destination. The lab was everything he had promised. A vast space filled with cutting-edge technology, workstations equipped with tools Rachel had only read about in industry publications, prototypes of devices that wouldn't reach the market for years. This is amazing, Ethan breathed, his eyes wide as he took in the technological wonderland. This section is dedicated to renewable energy research, Jackson explained, leading them to a particular area. We're working on next-generation solar technology that sounds remarkably similar to what you described. For the next hour, Jackson guided them through the lab, explaining projects and introducing Ethan to key researchers, who looked bemused but quickly warmed to the boy's intelligent questions. Rachel hung back slightly, watching the interaction with a mixture of emotions she couldn't quite name. There was joy in seeing Ethan so engaged, so clearly in his element among the technology and innovation. There was pride in how well he handled himself, how articulately he expressed his ideas to these accomplished scientists. But there was also a twinge of something else. Not quite fear, not quite sadness, but a recognition that something fundamental was shifting, that the careful balance of their life was being recalibrated. "Your son has a remarkable mind," a voice said beside her. Rachel turned to find an older man in a lab coat observing Jackson and Ethan, who were deep in conversation with a young engineer about energy storage solutions. "Thank you," she replied. "The resemblance is striking," the man continued. "Not just physically, but in how he thinks. That same ability to see connections others miss." He glanced at her curiously. "May I ask how long you've been back in Jackson's life?" "We're not. It's complicated," Rachel said, unsure how to explain the situation to a stranger. The man nodded understandingly. "It usually is with Jackson. I'm Dr. Alan Foster, by the way. I've been with Hayes Industries since the beginning." "Rachel Summers," she introduced herself, recognition dawning. "You were Jackson's mentor at MIT. "Indeed I was," Dr. Foster confirmed with a smile. "One of my brightest students, though don't tell him I said so. His ego is quite sufficient without my help." Rachel laughed, relaxing slightly. "That's certainly true." Dr. Foster's expression grew more serious as he continued to observe Jackson and Ethan. "I've never seen him like this with a child before," he remarked. "He usually avoids them at company functions, treats them as inconvenient distractions. Ethan is." Rachel hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "His son," Dr. Foster finished for her. "You don't need to confirm it. The evidence is right in front of me, and I've known Jackson long enough to recognize his features in that boy's face." He smiled gently at her surprise. "Don't worry, I'm not one for gossip." "Thank you," Rachel said, grateful for his discretion. "He's different with the boy," Dr. Foster observed. "More present, less guarded. It's refreshing." Rachel followed his gaze, seeing what he meant. Jackson's usual calculated precision had given way to something more genuine as he explained a complex piece of equipment to Ethan. His hands moving animatedly, his expression open in a way she hadn't seen in years. "I should get back to my work," Dr. Foster said, checking his watch. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Miss Summers. And may I say, whatever the circumstances, that young man is a credit to your parenting." As he walked away, Rachel felt a surge of gratitude for the unexpected kindness. In this temple to Jackson's success, she had expected to feel diminished, judged for the modest life she had built away from his world of wealth and influence. Instead, she found herself standing taller, secure in the knowledge that whatever else happened, she had raised a son who could hold his own in any environment. Eventually, Jackson glanced at his watch and reluctantly announced that they should return to his office. "The DNA technician will be waiting," he explained, though his tone suggested the test now seemed more a formality than a necessity. As they made their way back, Ethan walked slightly ahead with one of the younger researchers who had offered to show him a particular prototype, leaving Rachel and Jackson momentarily alone. "He's extraordinary," Jackson said quietly, his eyes fixed on Ethan's retreating figure. "Yes, he is," Rachel agreed. "You've done well with him." The simple acknowledgement, free from his earlier accusatory tone, caught Rachel by surprise. "Thank you," she said after a moment. "That means a lot." Jackson was silent for several steps, then asked, "Why didn't you ever ask me for money? Child support? Anything? Would you have given it without strings attached?" Rachel countered. "Without demanding control? Without making it a transaction?" His silence was answer enough. "That's why," she said simply. "I wanted Ethan to grow up free to become himself, not a project or an extension of your ambitions." Jackson's jaw tightened, but he didn't deny her assessment. "And now? What do you want now?" "I want what's best for Ethan," Rachel replied honestly. "He's curious about you, about where he comes from. He deserves the chance to know his father, if that's something you're willing to offer." "And if I am? Willing, that is." Rachel met his gaze directly. "Then we figure it out. One step at a time." They had reached his office, where a woman in a medical coat was waiting with equipment for the DNA test. The procedure was quick and clinical. Cheek swabs for both Jackson and Ethan, carefully labeled and sealed in the woman's presence. Results will be available in 3 days, she informed Jackson as she packed up her supplies. Expedite it, he instructed. I want them tomorrow. Yes, Mr. Hayes, she replied, unsurprised by the demand. In Jackson's world, even science could be accelerated by sufficient application of money and influence. After she left, an awkward silence fell over the office. The morning's exploration of the lab had created a temporary bridge, but now reality reasserted itself. They were still 3 people navigating uncharted territory, with 12 years of absence and unspoken truths between them. What happens next? Ethan asked, giving voice to the question hanging in the air. Jackson considered this, his expression thoughtful rather than calculating for perhaps the first time since they'd arrived. That depends, he said finally. What would you like to happen next? The question, directed at Ethan rather than Rachel, acknowledged the boy's agency in a way that surprised and pleased her. Ethan seemed equally surprised, taking a moment to gather his thoughts before responding. I'd like to get to know you, he said simply. Not just as Jackson Hayes, CEO, but as my father. The last words came out hesitantly, testing unfamiliar territory. Something shifted in Jackson's expression. A softening around the eyes, a slight relaxation of his perpetually rigid posture. I think that could be arranged, he said, his tone carefully neutral though his eyes betrayed more complex emotions. Perhaps you could come back to see more of the lab, or we could have dinner. The 3 of us, he added, glancing at Rachel to include her in the invitation. I'd like that, Ethan said, a cautious smile lighting his face. As would I, Rachel agreed, recognizing the significance of the moment. This wasn't Jackson taking control or dictating terms. This was him taking a tentative step toward connection, toward something he had explicitly rejected 13 years ago. Good. Jackson nodded, seeming almost relieved. I'll have Melissa coordinate with your schedule. As they prepared to leave, Jackson walked them to the elevator, an unexpected courtesy that didn't go unnoticed by the employees they passed. At the elevator doors, he hesitated, then extended his hand to Ethan. It was illuminating meeting you, Ethan, he said formally, though his eyes conveyed more than his words. Ethan shook the offered hand, his smaller one engulfed by his father's. You too, Mr. Hayes. Jackson, he corrected, the concession significant. You can call me Jackson. For now. The implied future progression hung in the air between them as the elevator doors closed, carrying Rachel and Ethan back down to the bustling lobby. Well, Rachel said as they stepped out into the bright midday sunshine. That went differently than I expected. He liked my project, Ethan said, a note of wonder in his voice. He really understood it. Of course he did, Rachel replied with a smile. He's one of the most brilliant minds in technology, just like his son. Ethan absorbed this, his expression thoughtful. Do you think he'll really want to see me again, after the DNA test? Rachel considered the question carefully. I think so, she said finally. I saw something in him today that I haven't seen in a very long time. A genuine connection, not just calculation. He's different than I imagined, Ethan admitted as they walked toward the subway station. Less scary, I guess. Still intense, but not as cold as I thought he'd be. Your father is a complicated man, Rachel said. He built walls around himself a long time ago, walls that helped him succeed in business but made real connections difficult. But you, she smiled, touching Ethan's cheek gently. You might be the one person who can reach past those walls. If you've ever witnessed the power of truth to transform even the most guarded heart, hit that like button. And if you believe that sometimes the most unexpected connections can lead to the most profound growth, subscribe to Timeless Love Tales with Mr. Harrison for more stories that remind us of the courage it takes to be vulnerable in a world that rewards armor. The next 3 days passed in a strange limbo of anticipation and uncertainty. Rachel tried to maintain their normal routine. Work, school, homework, dinner. but there was an undeniable current of tension running beneath the surface of their lives. Ethan checked his phone constantly, though he tried to hide it, and Rachel found herself doing the same, both of them waiting for word from Jackson. On the third day, as Rachel was preparing dinner, her phone rang with an unknown number. Her heart jumped as she answered, "Hello, Ms. Summers, this is Melissa Chun, Mr. Hayes' assistant." The woman's voice was professionally neutral. "Mr. Hayes would like to invite you and Ethan to dinner tomorrow evening at 7. At his residence, not a restaurant. He feels it would offer more privacy." The invitation to Jackson's home rather than a public venue was significant, a gesture of inclusion rather than a business meeting. "That would be fine," Rachel agreed. "Please tell him we accept." "Excellent. A car will pick you up at 6:30. Mr. Hayes has the address." After hanging up, Rachel called out to Ethan, who was working on homework in his room. "That was Jackson's assistant. He's invited us to dinner tomorrow night. At his home." Ethan appeared in the doorway, his expression a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "Did they get the DNA results?" "She didn't say, but I assume so." Rachel studied her son's face. "Are you nervous?" "A little," he admitted. What if he doesn't like what he found out?" Rachel crossed the room and pulled him into a hug, something he had been allowing less frequently as he edged toward adolescence. "The DNA test will only confirm what we already know, that you're his biological son. But whether he chooses to be a father to you, that's about him, not you. Remember that." Ethan nodded against her shoulder, then pulled back with the self-consciousness of a 12-year-old. "What should I wear?" "To his house, I mean." The question was so ordinary, so charmingly age-appropriate amid the extraordinary circumstances, that Rachel had to smile. "Something nice but comfortable. Maybe your blue button-down and khakis. Not too formal, not too casual. Just right," she assured him, recognizing his desire to make a good impression. "Now help me finish dinner. These potatoes won't peel themselves." The next evening, precisely at 6:30, a sleek black car pulled up in front of their apartment building. The driver, a professionally courteous man in a dark suit, opened the door for them with a polite nod. "Ms. Summers, Mr. Summers. Mr. Hayes is expecting you." The drive took them through progressively more affluent neighborhoods until they reached an exclusive enclave of modern mansions set back from the street behind security gates. The car turned into a private drive, where a guard checked their names against a list before allowing them to proceed. "Wow," Ethan murmured as the house came into view. A stunning contemporary structure of glass, steel, and stone that seemed to rise organically from the landscaped grounds. "He lives here alone?" "As far as I know," Rachel replied, feeling suddenly self-conscious about their modest apartment. She had never been to this house. During their relationship, Jackson had lived in a luxury condo downtown, already impressive but nothing like this monument to success. The car stopped at the front entrance, where Jackson himself waited rather than a butler or housekeeper. He was dressed more casually than they had seen him before. Dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that softened his usual corporate armor. "Welcome," he said, his tone formal but not cold. "Thank you for coming." He led them through a soaring entryway into a home that reflected his personality in every detail. Sleek, modern, meticulously organized, with cutting-edge technology seamlessly integrated into the design. Yet there were surprising touches of warmth. A crackling fire in a stone hearth, comfortable seating arranged for conversation rather than just aesthetic appeal. Even a few carefully chosen pieces of art that added color to the minimalist palette. "Your home is beautiful," Rachel offered, breaking the slightly awkward silence. "Thank you." Jackson gestured toward the living area. "Please make yourselves comfortable. Dinner will be ready shortly." As they settled onto a plush sofa, Rachel noticed Ethan taking in every detail of his father's home, his eyes wide with curiosity. Jackson, too, seemed to be observing Ethan, his gaze thoughtful rather than analytical for once. "Would you like something to drink?" Jackson asked. "Water, juice, soda for Ethan? Wine for you, Rachel?" "Water is fine for me," Rachel replied. "Juice, please," Ethan said. "If you have it. Apple or orange?" Apple, please. The mundane exchange felt surreal in its normalcy, as if they were any family gathering for a casual dinner rather than virtual strangers navigating a life-altering revelation. Jackson returned with their drinks, then took a seat across from them, his posture less rigid than it had been in his office but still carrying the inherent alertness that defined him. "I received the DNA results this morning," he said without preamble, his direct approach unchanged despite the more casual setting. Rachel felt Ethan tense beside her, his hand finding hers in an unconscious gesture of seeking support. "The results confirm what was already visually evident," Jackson continued, his gaze moving between them. "Ethan is my biological son." Though they had known this would be the conclusion, hearing it stated so definitively sent a ripple of emotion through the room. Rachel squeezed Ethan's hand reassuringly, waiting for Jackson to continue. "I've spent the past 3 days thinking about what this means," he said, his tone measured. "About my responsibilities, about what role I should play in Ethan's life moving forward." "And," Rachel prompted when he paused. Jackson's gaze fixed on Ethan. "I owe you an apology," he said, the words clearly difficult for a man unaccustomed to admitting fault. "Not for being absent from your life. I can't apologize for something I didn't know about, but for creating a situation where your mother felt that absence was the best option." The unexpected acknowledgement hung in the air, its significance not lost on any of them. Jackson Hayes, who built an empire on never admitting weakness or error, was acknowledging his role in the circumstances that had shaped Ethan's life. "I made it clear to your mother that I didn't want children," he continued, his honesty unflinching. "I saw them as obstacles to my ambitions, as complications in an already complex life. I was wrong." Rachel felt her breath catch at the admission. In all the years she had known him, she had never heard Jackson say those words. "I was wrong. Meeting you has been—" Jackson seemed to search for the right word. "Illuminating. You are not what I expected a 12-year-old to be. You're thoughtful, articulate, remarkably intelligent. You ask good questions. You listen to the answers. You show a maturity that, frankly, puts many adults to shame." Ethan straightened slightly under the praise, his expression a mixture of pleasure and caution, as if afraid to fully trust this unexpected validation. "I would like to get to know you better," Jackson said, the formal phrasing belying the emotional weight of the offer. "To be part of your life moving forward, if that's something you want." "I'd like that," Ethan replied, his voice steady despite the enormity of the moment. Jackson nodded, then turned to Rachel. "I know this complicates things for you. You've built a life, established routines, made decisions without my input for 12 years. I respect that. I'm not looking to disrupt what works or to impose my will. But I would like to be involved, to contribute in meaningful ways." The careful phrasing, so unlike Jackson's usual directive approach, told Rachel more than his words. He was trying, really trying, to navigate this new territory with sensitivity rather than simply asserting control. "I appreciate that," she said. "And yes, it will require adjustments on all our parts. But if it's what Ethan wants, then we'll make it work." A timer chimed from somewhere in the house, breaking the emotional tension of the moment. "That would be dinner," Jackson said, rising from his seat. "I hope you like Italian." The housekeeper prepared lasagna before leaving for the evening. "You can cook?" Rachel couldn't help asking, remembering a man who had once subsisted almost entirely on takeout and restaurant meals. A ghost of a smile touched Jackson's lips. "I've acquired a few skills in 13 years. Though I'll admit, Sophia's lasagna is far superior to my attempts." The dining room continued the home's modern aesthetic, with a sleek table that could have seated 12, but had been intimately set for 3 at one end. The lasagna was served with a fresh salad and warm bread, the meal far more homey than Rachel had expected. As they ate, the conversation gradually relaxed, moving from careful politeness to something approaching genuine exchange. Jackson asked Ethan about school, about his friends, about his interests beyond science and technology. Ethan, initially reserved, grew more animated as the meal progressed, his natural curiosity and enthusiasm breaking through his caution. "Do you play any instruments?" Jackson asked as they finished the main course. Piano, Ethan replied. For about 4 years now. Mom says it helps with mathematical thinking, but I just like how it sounds. He's quite good, Rachel added. Though we only have a keyboard in the apartment. Space constraints. Something flickered across Jackson's face. A realization, perhaps, of the practical limitations that had shaped Ethan's life. So different from the unlimited resources that defined his own. I have a piano, he said. A Steinway Grand. Sits mostly unused, I'm afraid. I took lessons as a child but never developed a genuine passion for it. Really? Ethan's eyes lit up. Could I see it? Of course. Jackson seemed pleased by the interest. After dessert, perhaps? The meal concluded with a simple but elegant tiramisu, and then Jackson led them to a room off the main living area where a magnificent grand piano gleamed in the soft lighting. It's beautiful, Ethan breathed, approaching the instrument with reverent hands. Please try it, Jackson encouraged. Ethan needed no further invitation. He settled onto the bench, positioned his hands, and after a moment's consideration, began to play. The piece was Debussy's Clair de Lune, rendered with a sensitivity and technical skill that belied his 12 years. Rachel watched Jackson's face as the music filled the room. His expression had softened completely, the perpetual calculation replaced by something approaching wonder as he observed this unexpected talent in the son he had just discovered. When Ethan finished, the final notes lingering in the air, Jackson remained silent for a moment, visibly moved. That was extraordinary, he said finally. You play beautifully. Thank you, Ethan replied, a flush of pleasure coloring his cheeks. The sound is amazing. So much richer than my keyboard. You should play here whenever you like, Jackson said, the offer spontaneous and genuine. This piano deserves to be played by someone who appreciates it. The invitation hung in the air, significant in its implications. Not a one-time visit but an ongoing connection. A standing welcome in his home. I'd like that, Ethan said simply. As the evening drew to a close, Jackson walked them to the waiting car, the same driver having returned at a prearranged time. At the door, he hesitated, clearly navigating unfamiliar emotional territory. I'd like to see you again soon, he said to Ethan. Perhaps this weekend? We could visit the Science Center. They have a new exhibit on quantum computing that might interest you. That sounds great. Ethan agreed, his earlier caution now tempered with genuine enthusiasm. Jackson turned to Rachel. If that works for your schedule? It does, she confirmed, appreciating his consideration. Saturday would be best. Saturday it is. Jackson nodded, then added with careful formality. Thank you both for coming tonight. It was important to me. As the car pulled away, Rachel noticed Ethan looking back at the house, at the solitary figure of Jackson Hayes standing in the doorway, watching them leave. He seems different, Ethan observed. Less scary than at the office. I think he's trying, Rachel said. This is all new territory for him. For all of us, Ethan pointed out with his characteristic insight. Rachel smiled, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. Yes, for all of us. The following weeks established a tentative rhythm to their evolving relationship. Saturday outings became a regular occurrence. The Science Center, as promised, followed by a robotics competition, a university lecture on artificial intelligence that Jackson thought might interest Ethan, even a baseball game when Jackson discovered Ethan's fondness for the local team. Rachel accompanied them on these outings initially, serving as both buffer and bridge between father and son. But as their comfort with each other grew, she occasionally stepped back, allowing them time to develop their own relationship without her mediation. He asked about you today, Ethan reported after returning from a visit to Jackson's research facility. About your work at Meridian Tech. Oh, Rachel tried to sound casual, though she was surprised by Jackson's interest in her professional life. What did he want to know? About your adaptive learning platform. He said it sounded innovative. Ethan hesitated, then added, he asked if you were happy there, if they appreciated your contributions. The questions revealed more than perhaps Jackson had intended. A lingering awareness of her capabilities, perhaps even a recognition of opportunities lost when she had walked away from Hayes Industries. "And what did you tell him?" Rachel asked, curious about her son's perception. "I told him you love the work but get frustrated sometimes because they don't have the resources to implement all your ideas." Ethan shrugged. Just the truth. The truth. Such a simple concept, yet so transformative in its application. The truth of Ethan's existence had disrupted Jackson's carefully ordered world, had forced him to reconsider priorities he had held immutable for decades. And now, the truth of Rachel's professional situation, innocently reported by their son, seemed to have sparked something in Jackson's strategic mind. 3 days later, Rachel received an unexpected call from Marcus Whitman, the R&D director who had approached her at the gala. "Rachel, I hope I'm not interrupting," he began when she answered. "Not at all, Marcus. What can I do for you? I'm calling about an opportunity one think might interest you." His tone was professional but friendly. Hayes Industries is establishing a new division focused on educational technology, adaptive learning platforms, personalized curriculum development, accessibility tools for students with different learning styles. "It's right in your wheelhouse." Rachel's pulse quickened. "That sounds fascinating, but before you say anything," Marcus interrupted gently, "I want to be clear that this is coming from me, not Jackson. He doesn't know I'm calling you." "He doesn't." Rachel was genuinely surprised. "No. He mentioned your work at Meridian in passing, and I did some research on my own. Your innovations in adaptive learning algorithms are impressive, Rachel. We need someone with your vision to lead this initiative." "As what exactly?" "Division director," Marcus replied without hesitation. "Full autonomy, competitive salary, resources to build your team from the ground up. This would be your project to shape." The offer was tempting, more than tempting. It represented everything Rachel had wanted professionally, but had been unable to achieve at Meridian due to budget constraints and institutional caution. "I appreciate the offer, Marcus, but given the personal complications, I understand your concerns," he acknowledged. "But consider this, Hayes Industries is a large company. You would report to me, not directly to Jackson. Your professional relationship could remain separate from your personal one." "Could it, though?" Rachel questioned. "This is Jackson Hayes we're talking about. He likes to control everything in his orbit." Marcus chuckled. "The Jackson Hayes of 13 years ago, absolutely. But he's different lately. More willing to delegate, less insistent on micromanaging every detail. The board has noticed. The executive team has noticed." He paused meaningfully. "People are saying fatherhood agrees with him." The observation caught Rachel off guard. "Fatherhood? Is that what people are saying?" "Word travels fast in corporate circles," Marcus confirmed, "especially when it involves someone as high-profile as Jackson Hayes. But that's not why I'm calling. I'm calling because you're the right person for this position, personal complications notwithstanding." "I'll need to think about it," Rachel said, her mind already racing with possibilities and concerns. "Of course. Take your time." Marcus paused, then added, "But not too much time. We're looking to announce the division launch next month." After hanging up, Rachel sat at her kitchen table, turning the unexpected offer over in her mind. Working at Hayes Industries again, but this time on her own terms, with resources and authority she had only dreamed of at Meridian. It was professionally irresistible, but personally, the complications were significant. How would it affect Ethan to have both parents working at the same company? How would it impact the delicate balance they were establishing in their three-way relationship? And most importantly, could she trust that Jackson had truly changed enough to respect her professional autonomy? That evening, after Ethan had gone to bed, Rachel called the one person whose perspective she trusted implicitly. "He did what?" Diane exclaimed when Rachel explained the situation. "Jackson Hayes is trying to get you back into his company?" "That's just it," Rachel clarified. "According to Marcus, Jackson doesn't know about the offer. This is coming from R&D, not the executive suite." "And you believe that?" Diane's skepticism was evident even through the phone. "I'm not sure," Rachel admitted. "It would be very like the old Jackson to orchestrate something like this behind the scenes. But also, he has been different lately. With Ethan, certainly, but even with me. Less controlling, more, I don't know, collaborative. People don't change that fundamentally," Diane cautioned. "Especially not men like Jackson Hayes." "Don't they?" Rachel found herself playing devil's advocate. "Becoming a father has changed him. I've seen it happening over these past weeks. He's still intense, still brilliant, still demanding. But there's a new dimension there. A capacity for connection I never thought he possessed." Diane was quiet for a moment. "You're not falling for him again, are you?" "No," Rachel said quickly, perhaps too quickly. "This is about a professional opportunity, not a personal reconciliation." "If you say so." Diane's tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. "Just be careful, Rachel. You've built a good life for yourself and Ethan. Don't let Jackson Hayes disrupt that unless you're absolutely sure it's the right move." The warning was fair, Rachel acknowledged as they ended the call. She had worked hard to establish independence after leaving Jackson, had constructed a life defined by her own choices rather than his influence. Taking a position at Hayes Industries, even one with promised autonomy, would inevitably reintroduce his presence into her professional sphere. Yet the opportunity itself was undeniably compelling. The chance to build something meaningful, to implement ideas that had languished at Meridian due to resource constraints, to make a genuine impact on educational technology. These were professional dreams she had harbored for years. The next day, Rachel called Marcus and arranged to meet for coffee to discuss the position in more detail. The conversation confirmed her initial impression. This was a genuine opportunity, not a manipulative ploy. The Educational Technology Division had been in development for months, predating Jackson's discovery of Ethan. The timing was coincidental rather than calculated. "I'll need to discuss this with Ethan," Rachel said as their meeting concluded. "And with Jackson. If I'm going to consider this seriously, I want everything on the table." "I understand," Marcus agreed. "Take the time you need. Just let me know your decision by the end of next week if possible." That evening, when Ethan returned from school, Rachel broached the subject carefully. "I had an interesting meeting today," she began as they prepared dinner together. "With Marcus Whitman from Hayes Industries." Ethan looked up from the vegetables he was chopping. "Dad's company? What did he want?" The casual use of Dad rather than Jackson was new, a subtle shift that had occurred gradually over the past weeks. Rachel noted it without comment, focusing instead on the matter at hand. "He offered me a position," she explained. "Director of a new division focused on educational technology. The kind of work I've always wanted to do but haven't had the resources for at Meridian." Ethan's knife paused mid-chop. "Are you going to take it?" "I'm considering it," Rachel said honestly. "But I wanted to talk to you about it first. It would mean some changes for us." "Like what?" "Like both your parents working at the same company. Like potentially more interactions between all of us. Like navigating professional and personal boundaries that might sometimes overlap." Ethan considered this, his expression thoughtful. "Would you be working directly with Dad?" "No, I'd report to Marcus. But it's Jackson's company, so there would inevitably be some interaction." "Do you want the job?" Ethan asked, cutting to the heart of the matter with his characteristic directness. Rachel smiled. "Professionally? Yes, very much. It's an amazing opportunity. But I'm concerned about the personal complications." "Because of your history with Dad?" "Partly that," Rachel acknowledged. "And partly because we've just started finding our balance as whatever we are now. Co-parents, I suppose. I don't want to disrupt that if it's working for you." Ethan resumed chopping, his movements precise. "I think you should take it," he said after a moment. "If it's what you really want to do. Dad seems different now. Less controlling, I guess. And you've always said we shouldn't make decisions based on fear." The wisdom in his young voice brought a lump to Rachel's throat. "When did you get so smart?" she asked, ruffling his hair affectionately. "Must be genetic," he replied with a grin. The next step was more daunting. discussing the opportunity with Jackson himself. Rachel arranged to meet him for coffee the following day, choosing a neutral location rather than his office or home. He arrived precisely on time, dressed more casually than his office attire but still impeccably put together. "Is everything all right with Ethan?" he asked immediately, concern evident in his voice. "Ethan's fine," Rachel assured him. "I wanted to talk to you about something else. A professional matter." Jackson's expression shifted from concern to curiosity as he took the seat across from her. "I'm listening." "Marcus Whitman has offered me a position at Hayes Industries," Rachel said, deciding directness was the best approach. Director of the new Educational Technology Division. If Jackson was surprised, he hid it well. His expression remained neutral as he asked, "And what did you tell him?" "That I needed to think about it, and that I wanted to discuss it with you before making a decision." "Why?" The question was simple but loaded. "Because it complicates things between us," Rachel replied honestly. "Because I need to know if you can truly separate our personal history from a professional relationship. Because I won't take a position where my autonomy might be compromised by our connection." Jackson was quiet for a moment, his fingers tapping thoughtfully against his coffee cup. "Marcus didn't tell me he was approaching you," he said finally. "Though I can't say I'm entirely surprised. Your work at Meridian has been impressive, despite their limited resources." "You've been following my work?" Rachel couldn't hide her surprise. A slight smile touched his lips. "I make it a point to stay informed about innovations in all technology sectors. Your adaptive learning platform caught my attention even before." He hesitated. "Before Ethan." The admission was unexpected, a reminder that their professional connection had always been genuine, even when their personal one had fractured. "To answer your question," Jackson continued, his tone measured, "yes, I believe I can separate our personal history from a professional relationship. I'm not the same man I was 13 years ago, Rachel. Discovering Ethan has changed perspectives I thought were immutable." "In what way?" Rachel pressed, needing more than vague assurances. Jackson considered the question with characteristic thoroughness. "I've built my life and my company on the principle that control equals success," he said finally. "The more variables I could manage, the more certain the outcome. It was effective in business, but it made genuine connections impossible." He met her gaze directly. "I'm learning, through Ethan, that some of the most valuable things in life can't be controlled or engineered. They can only be experienced, appreciated, nurtured." The insight was so unexpected, so contrary to the Jackson Hayes she had known, that Rachel found herself momentarily speechless. "If you take the position," he continued into her silence, "you would report to Marcus, not to me. Your division would have the same autonomy as any other at Hayes Industries. I would not interfere with your professional decisions or use our personal connection to influence company matters. And if we disagree, professionally, then we disagree as colleagues sometimes do. We find a resolution through the established channels, not through personal leverage." He leaned forward slightly. "I want you to take the position because you're the right person for it, Rachel. Not because of Ethan, not because of our history, but because your vision for educational technology aligns with where Hayes Industries needs to go." His sincerity was compelling, but Rachel had learned caution where Jackson Hayes was concerned. "I'll need those assurances in writing," she said, "as part of my employment contract." Rather than being offended, Jackson nodded approvingly. "A prudent request. I'll have legal draft the appropriate clauses." The conversation shifted then to more specific aspects of the position, resources, team structure, development timelines. As they talked, Rachel found herself slipping into the familiar rhythm of professional exchange with Jackson, the intellectual connection that had initially drawn them together reasserting itself without the complications of their past romantic entanglement. "You've thought about this a lot," she observed as he outlined his vision for the Educational Technology Division. "This isn't just a new profit center for Hayes Industries, is it?" "No," Jackson admitted. "It's something more personal. Watching Ethan these past weeks, seeing how his mind works, how he absorbs and processes information, it's made me think about education differently, about the potential to create tools that adapt to individual learning styles, that make knowledge accessible to every child, not just those who fit the traditional model. The passion in his voice was genuine, a far cry from the calculated business decisions that had defined his career. This was something new, a vision driven by personal connection rather than market analysis. "That's exactly what I've been trying to do at Meridian," Rachel said, unable to hide her excitement. "But with limited resources and institutional resistance to innovation. At Hayes Industries, you would have neither limitation," Jackson promised. "Full funding, complete creative control, the best team you can assemble." The offer was professionally irresistible. But personally, Rachel still had reservations. "I need to think about it," she said as their meeting concluded. "To consider all the implications, not just the professional ones." "Of course," Jackson nodded, respecting her caution. "Take the time you need. The position will remain open until you decide." As they parted ways outside the coffee shop, Rachel found herself watching Jackson walk toward his waiting car, struck by how much had changed between them in such a short time. The man who had once been the center of her world, then her greatest regret, was now something else entirely. Not quite a friend, more than a co-parent, a complex figure in her life whose role was still evolving. The decision to accept the position at Hayes Industries didn't come in a single moment of clarity, but rather through a series of smaller realizations over the following days. Conversations with Ethan, who remained supportive of the idea. A final meeting with Marcus to clarify reporting structures and division autonomy. A careful review of the employment contract, which included the specific protections Rachel had requested. But perhaps most influential was the observation of Jackson with Ethan during their weekend outings, which Rachel had continued to occasionally join. The change in Jackson was subtle but undeniable. A genuine interest in Ethan's thoughts and feelings, a willingness to listen rather than direct, a capacity for connection that she had never believed him capable of developing. If he could change in such fundamental ways as a father, perhaps he could truly honor his promise to respect her professional autonomy as well. 1 week after her coffee meeting with Jackson, Rachel called Marcus to accept the position. 2 weeks after that, she gave notice at Meridian Tech. And 1 month to the day after Jackson's gala, where their carefully separated lives had collided so dramatically, Rachel Summers walked into Hayes Industries as the Director of Educational Technology. Not as Jackson Hayes' ex-partner, not as Ethan's mother, but as a professional in her own right, there to build something meaningful on her own terms. The transition wasn't without challenges. There were whispers, of course, speculation about her relationship with the CEO, curiosity about the son who occasionally visited the building after school, questions about whether her rapid rise to director level was merit-based or influenced by personal connections. Rachel met these challenges with the quiet dignity that had become her hallmark, letting her work speak for itself. And speak it did. Within 3 months, her division had developed a prototype adaptive learning platform that outperformed anything on the market. Within 6 months, they had secured partnerships with 3 major school districts for pilot programs. Within a year, Hayes Educational Technology was being hailed as a revolutionary force in the industry. Throughout this professional evolution, their personal relationship continued to develop as well. Jackson remained actively involved in Ethan's life, their weekend outings expanding to include school events, science competitions, even ordinary family dinners at Rachel's apartment, where the Billionaire CEO learned to appreciate the simple pleasure of takeout pizza and board games. "He's different with you too," Eleanor Hayes observed during one of her now regular visits with her grandson. "More human, somehow. Less the machine he became after his father died." "He's trying," Rachel acknowledged, watching from the kitchen as Jackson helped Ethan with a particularly challenging chess problem in the living room. "It doesn't always come naturally to him, but he's really trying." "For Ethan's sake?" Eleanor asked, her keen eyes missing nothing. "Initially, yes," Rachel replied honestly. "But I think he's discovering that connection has its own rewards, separate from any strategic advantage." Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. "You know, when he first told me about Ethan, about you coming to the gala, I expected a very different outcome. Jackson has never handled surprises well, especially ones that challenge his control." "What changed, do you think?" Rachel asked, genuinely curious about the older woman's perspective. Eleanor considered the question, her gaze still fixed on her son and grandson. I think, perhaps for the first time in his adult life, Jackson encountered something he wanted more than control. She turned to Rachel with a knowing smile. Or someone, rather. Two someones. The implication hung in the air between them, neither confirmed nor denied as Rachel turned back to preparing dinner. The truth was, she wasn't entirely sure herself what Jackson wanted. What she wanted, what might be possible between them now that they were different people than they had been 13 years ago. What she did know was that the cruel invitation meant to mock her had instead opened a door to something none of them had anticipated. A chance for healing, for connection, for the creation of something that resembled a family, unconventional though it might be. If you've ever had life take an unexpected turn that led to growth you never anticipated, hit that like button. And if you believe that sometimes our greatest challenges can become our most profound opportunities, subscribe to Timeless Love Tales with Mr. Harrison for more stories that remind us of the transformative power of truth and courage. 6 months after Rachel joined Hayes Industries, the company hosted its annual charity gala, a more meaningful event than the anniversary celebration where their story had begun. As Rachel prepared in her modest apartment, now upgraded to a slightly larger unit in a better neighborhood, a practical decision, she insisted, not influenced by Jackson's subtle hints about school districts. She found herself reflecting on how dramatically their lives had changed. "Mom," Ethan called from his room. "Is this tie okay with this shirt?" Rachel smiled at the echo of their conversation before the fateful gala 6 months earlier. "Let me see," she called back. Ethan appeared in her doorway, looking startlingly grown up in his suit, the months of knowing his father having added a new confidence to his bearing. At nearly 13 now, he stood almost to her shoulder, his features increasingly reminiscent of Jackson's, though softened by Rachel's influence. "You look very handsome," she assured him, making a minor adjustment to his tie. "Very grown up. Dad says I should start learning about the Foundation's work," Ethan said, a hint of pride in his voice. "He says philanthropy is as important as business success." "He's right," Rachel agreed, surprised and pleased by this evidence of Jackson's evolving values. The man she had known 13 years ago had viewed charity primarily as a tax strategy and PR opportunity, not as a genuine responsibility. The doorbell rang, signaling Jackson's arrival to escort them to the event. Unlike the previous gala where Rachel and Ethan had arrived as unexpected guests, tonight they would attend openly as... what exactly? Family was still too defined a term for what they were becoming. But something more than co-parents, more than colleagues, more than people connected only through their shared love for a remarkable boy. Jackson stood at the door in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, his commanding presence softened by the genuine smile that greeted them. "You both look wonderful," he said, his appreciation evident as his gaze lingered on Rachel in her elegant emerald gown. "You clean up pretty well yourself," she replied with a smile, accepting the small box he extended toward her. "A token of appreciation," he explained as she opened it to reveal a delicate silver bracelet. "For the Educational Technology Division's success." The board was impressed with the quarterly results. The gift was thoughtfully professional rather than personally intimate, a careful balance they had maintained in the months since she had joined Hayes Industries. "It's beautiful," Rachel said, allowing him to fasten it around her wrist. "Thank you. I have something for you too, Ethan," Jackson added, producing a small velvet pouch. "Though it's less conventional." Ethan opened the pouch to find a chess piece, a knight carved from polished obsidian. "It's amazing," he said, examining the intricate details. "But why just one piece?" "It's the start of a set," Jackson explained. "I thought we could build it together, one piece at a time as you master new strategies." The thoughtfulness of the gift, tailored so specifically to Ethan's interests and their developing relationship, brought a warmth to Rachel's heart that she hadn't expected. "Ready to go?" Jackson asked, glancing at his watch. "As major donors, we should arrive before the general guests." The casual "we" wasn't lost on Rachel, a subtle acknowledgement of their evolving status as a unit, however unconventional. The charity gala was held at the same venue as the anniversary celebration that had changed their lives 6 months earlier. But this time, as they entered the grand ballroom together, there were no shocked whispers, no scandalized stares. Instead, they were greeted with respectful nods, warm smiles, the acceptance of the social circle that had initially been so stunned by Ethan's existence. "Miss Summers," Eleanor Hayes approached, elegant as ever in midnight blue. "And my handsome grandson. You both look wonderful." "Thanks, Grandma," Ethan replied, accepting her embrace with the ease of familiarity that had developed through their regular Sunday brunches. "Mother," Jackson acknowledged with a nod that contained more warmth than Rachel had ever seen him display toward his formidable parent. "You're looking well. Amazing what regular contact with one's family can do for one's health," Eleanor replied dryly, her sharp wit unchanged despite the softening of their relationship. As the evening progressed, Rachel observed the subtle but significant changes in how Jackson moved through the room. Still commanding, still respected, but somehow more connected to those around him. He introduced Ethan with evident pride, not as an heir or a legacy but as a person of value in his own right. He acknowledged Rachel's professional contributions to Hayes Industries without any hint of condescension or ownership. "He's different," Marcus observed, joining Rachel at the edge of the room as she watched Jackson and Ethan in conversation with a group of board members. "The whole company feels it. More collaborative, less autocratic. The Jackson Hayes of 2 years ago would never have greenlit half the initiatives we're pursuing now." "People can change," Rachel said, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice, "when they have reason enough." Later, as the formal dinner concluded and the dancing began, Jackson approached her with an unexpected question. "Would you dance with me?" he asked, extending his hand with a formality that acknowledged the significance of the request. Rachel hesitated only briefly before accepting. As they moved onto the dance floor, his hand resting lightly at her waist, she was struck by the strange circularity of their journey, from lovers to strangers to something new that had yet to be fully defined. "I never thanked you," Jackson said as they moved in perfect rhythm to the music, their bodies remembering a harmony their minds had forgotten. "For what?" "For bringing Ethan to the gala that night. For having the courage to show me what I didn't know I was missing." His gaze was direct, unguarded in a way she had rarely seen. "You could have kept him from me forever. I would never have known." "He deserved to know his father," Rachel said simply. "And you deserved to know your son. Even though I explicitly said I never wanted children, that they were, what was my charming phrase? Anchors that drown ambition?" Rachel smiled at the echo of Diane's skeptical questions from months ago. "People can change in 13 years. Some things don't," Jackson replied, his voice dropping slightly as he drew her incrementally closer. "Some things just get buried under ambition and fear and the illusion of control." The implication hung between them, neither acknowledged nor denied as they continued their dance, watched by their son who observed them with the thoughtful expression that had become his hallmark. Later that night, as their car pulled up to Rachel's apartment building, Jackson walked them to the door as had become his custom. Ethan, exhausted from the evening's excitement, said his goodbyes quickly and disappeared inside to get ready for bed. "Thank you for a lovely evening," Rachel said, lingering in the doorway. "Thank you for a remarkable 6 months," Jackson countered, his expression more open than she had seen it since their early days together. "For giving me the chance to know Ethan. For showing me that success can be measured in more than market share and profit margins." The sincerity in his voice touched something in Rachel that she had thought long buried, a recognition of the connection that had initially drawn them together, now tempered by experience and maturity. "Good night, Jackson," she said softly, not quite ready to explore what that recognition might mean. "Good night, Rachel." He hesitated, then added, "I'll call tomorrow about Ethan's science competition next weekend." "He'd like that," she replied. "He's nervous about presenting to the judges." "He'll be brilliant," Jackson said with absolute confidence. "He always is." As she closed the door behind him, Rachel leaned against it for a moment, reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. The invitation that had been meant to mock her had instead opened a door to something none of them had anticipated. A chance for healing, for connection, for the creation of something that resembled a family, unconventional though it might be. The future remained unwritten, the exact nature of their relationship still evolving. But one thing was certain. The truth, revealed that night at the gala, had transformed all their lives in ways none of them could have predicted. Jackson had discovered the joy of fatherhood he had once rejected. Ethan had found the connection to his origins that he had craved. And Rachel had reclaimed not just her professional power but also her capacity for trust, for forgiveness, for the possibility of new beginnings. Sometimes, she reflected as she moved through the quiet apartment, checking on her sleeping son, the most devastating weapon against arrogance isn't revenge. It's truth. The simple, powerful truth that had turned the tables on a billionaire CEO's attempt to mock her, revealing instead the emptiness at the heart of his success and offering him a chance at something far more valuable than all his wealth and power combined. Genuine connection with the son he never knew he had, and perhaps, in time, with the woman who had been brave enough to show him what truly mattered. If the story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to Timeless Love Tales with Mr. Harrison. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had a moment where truth changed everything? Where what seemed like an ending became an unexpected beginning? Remember that sometimes the greatest courage isn't found in grand gestures, but in simple honesty spoken at exactly the right moment. Until next time, this is Mr. Harrison, reminding you that the most powerful stories aren't about revenge or triumph, but about the transformative power of truth, courage, and the connections that make us truly human.